Yeah.
And what is it called?
It's called Everything is Perfect, Nothing is Real, right? It's been a while since I've looked at it.
That's
At
great.
the title.
I'm gonna go look all the episodes. This
But
is awesome.
yeah, everything's perfect, nothing is real. Because I had the idea that it was about talking about filmmaking, where everything looks perfect, but none of it's real.
Yeah.
But I guess if you could just briefly explain how you got into the industry.
Sure.
And how you went from the industry to becoming the business agent for our local.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe like why that interested you.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in New Orleans. I am the daughter of 2 writers.
Cool.
And I didn't have TV until I was 9.
Wow.
So I grew up reading and imagining a lot of things. Boredom, I think, makes the best artists and creatives in general. We need boredom to create and to have that kind of time to let our brains roam and cycle through our ideas. And I had a lot of that as a child, which I'm really grateful for. I don't think we have nearly as much of that in this day and age. When I got to high school, I was able to attend NOCA in Benjamin Franklin. At NOCA, I studied visual arts. I studied creative writing for the first year, and then I studied visual arts for the last 3 years. I went to Tulane for visual arts, and Katrina happened during Tulane, and I was able to go to Boston and do a semester there, a Katrina semester. Wow. And I studied sculpture, traditional sculpture while I was there. And I had done some sculpture at NOCA as well, but this was a really awesome intensive class, and they had some great painting classes as well. I did figure study classes and all sorts of great things that, they say you don't use your fine arts education, and I definitely used so much of my fine arts education later in life. So once I got out of college, I became kind of like an artist for hire, and I worked at my aunt had a fountain shop, and I was an exterior designer. I worked as a writer for 6 years for Louisiana Homes and Gardens magazine. I did murals and, commissioned artwork all over the city, and I started hearing about film. And I really wanted to get in because I heard that the pay was competitive and that you could get, healthcare. And I was past the point of, being able to take advantage of my parents' healthcare, having to pay for my own. And it was rough being an artist. The starving artist thing is real. And it's hard to make a living as a creative in New Orleans, even though it's such a creative city. Yeah. And you really have to constantly be hustling. There are some really incredible opportunities if you grow up or just base yourself here and immerse yourself in the artistic and creative community. But with film, it gave me such a level up, and I truly believe that's because of unions. This is an industry of unions, and because we have all these specialized skills, we can negotiate these contracts. We have the bargaining power to do so because they need our special skills, in order to make these incredible films. Right. Some more incredible than others. Some we don't even watch when we work on them. We're just like, oh, my paycheck cash, this is great, but it took me like 2 years to get into film. It's hard if you don't know somebody. And in the meantime, I was doing mold making for my family's fountain shop and teaching myself mold making, which is difficult, right? Yeah. There weren't a lot of resources online. Course, yeah. So there wasn't a lot, and I tried to find people to teach me, and there really wasn't anybody to teach me in the city. There was like one person doing molds, but they didn't want to teach anybody. They were like, I'm doing my own thing, sorry. Mm-hmm. And then I found film. At the time was dating a locations manager, and he got me a job on a small film called Bayou Tales. It was my kind of first dive into film. And the first day I was the scenic artist. The second day, the production designer wasn't working out, and the director and producer came over and he was like, all right, you're the production designer. I was like, what? You know, even though you don't get paid as much and there's a lot of stress and there's not a lot of budget, you end up having to stretch those creative muscles and like figure out how to like make things work. And that exercise is important. And then I got a job on another one that was like Aztec warrior. I was sculpting these like giant cat heads and molding them. And then I sculpted some watermelons that they blew up. That was really fun.
Whoa.
I remember that was like the first time that I was like, this is...
In the Aztec one?
Yeah, there was a scene where they were like, there had to be this whole carved watermelon food display, and they used the watermelons in the fight scene, so I had to carve like multiple watermelons to look the same so they could blow them up, and I was like, this is kind of cool.
What were those made out of?
They're watermelon.
Oh, they're actually
I was carving watermelon, so I was really sick of watermelon by the end of the day. And then, you know, so those were two small jobs, but I hadn't really gotten a chance to work on a big union show, and that was really my dream. And I answered a job ad on Craigslist to work at a Mardi Gras float building studio. And it was a bunch of film artists that were working there in the off season, like between busy times, right? And they were all prepping for Mardi Gras. I started working there, and I think it was December of 2012. And that's where I met my future husband, Dave. and he ended up hiring me on to Maze Runner.
Oh, okay.
As a sculptor. Yeah.
Wow.
And we fell in love in Baton Rouge, sculpting the maze for Maze Runner together.
Oh, I didn't know that was in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, it was in Baton Rouge. We stayed in Baton Rouge for months, and it was an incredible film to work on. And I also got to do mold making on that show. And when he pulled me into the mold making department, because he also had a lot of those skills, he trained under the son of the guy who was like the Fox Studios mold maker. So there was a lot of institutional knowledge that had been passed down to him over the years. And, you know, he had many years in as a mold maker already. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, this is like, I'm getting paid to do this, but I'm getting to experience all these skills that I've been looking for. Right.
It's like perfect.
Yeah. And I was able to, you know, get healthcare through my employer. I got my 90 days, which at the time I needed 90 days to join the union. Wow. I was able to get, you know, my 90 days, and, you know, it was competitive wages that I didn't have to go in there with a client and haggle over. You know, I mean, of course, now, you know, you want to negotiate wages and stuff like that. But when you're starting out, like healthcare and like a decent wage, that was a huge deal to me.
Right.
And being able to learn all these skills. I had never sculpted in styrofoam before. I'd only sculpted in clay and plaster and all these other mediums, metal, like all this stuff. But styrofoam was so forgiving and fun to sculpt with, and it was a great experience. I had a wonderful time, and so that was the beginning of my immersion into the union. And he and the other sculptors were already involved in the union, and they made it really clear it's important to go to union meetings. Because I didn't really understand, you know, I mean, I was from a very liberal background that supported unions, but I didn't understand the role and how big of a role the unions played in film. And so I started going to union meetings. I started getting involved, and I realized that not a lot of people show up. And so it's just the people at the meetings that kind of are the people that are making these decisions for the entire rest of the body. Yeah. And you want to be a part of those decisions, because this is what your dues are going towards. Right. This is going to affect your, you know, your contracts, your jobs. It's a big deal. Yeah. And then there's all sorts of training opportunities and cool things that you can get involved in with the union. So that's how I got started in film.
Well, do you want to explain a little bit about what's been going on, why anything was going on with the tax credits, and what the process was for you, and and what it means for people who live and work here in the film industry?
Our tax credit legislation has been around since 2001, 2002. We were the first to introduce legislation that had a film tax credit, the first
Wow.
state in America. Yeah, Canada did it, and then we were like, that looks kind of cool, and we created this program that would incentivize films to come here. And now I think it's 38 other states at this point, or 34. So it's quite a few. Other states have followed suit, and it's more competitive now. But ours were the first, and they've developed over time. They've been very successful. We have a long and storied history of film and television production here. And it's actually pretty amazing that so much tourism is because of film, film exposure of the state. So people have seen, Steel Magnolias, and they want to kind of come see where that was filmed, or any number of incredible films. Interview with the Vampire. Yeah. Yes. Tarzan was even filmed here.
Really?
Yeah. That was, I think, the first film that was filmed here. Yeah, and a bunch of monkeys were let loose by Shreveport. It's also a common misconception that it's just New Orleans, and I think that's what a lot of legislators misconstrue and maybe don't understand until we educate them. But we have filmed within the past 5 years throughout 33 different parishes in Louisiana. We film all over the state.
Yeah.
And if we're not filming there, we're often patronizing businesses that are based out of those parishes.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, we have so many different businesses that need to be involved when you make a film. Lumber businesses, antique businesses, upholstery, clothing business. I mean, like the hotels, restaurants, the list goes on. There were 2 different films that were in Kitsatchie National Forest in 2022, Rebel Ridge and 65 Zoic. We knew it as Zoic, but it came out as 65 with Adam Driver. And both times when the films, rolled into that area, and the hotels were bought out and the restaurants were patronized, everybody got a huge economic boost.
Yeah.
It's a big economic driver wherever a film decides to land and shoot, a location, even if it's just a week or 2, or even a few months. I mean, it's a boon to that economy. And over the years, we've had to change quite a few minds of senators and state representatives and various cabinet members and even governors, that just didn't understand how big of an impact film has. Yeah. We support 10,000 jobs, over 10,000 jobs actually, annually. So we're talking about high-paying jobs that keep people in Louisiana. I was talking to my stepson and his partner last night, and they are toying with the idea of whether to stay or leave the state, when they graduate college. And I don't want him to leave,
right, of course.
I love him so much. Yeah. And so, this concept of the brain drain is very real and close to my heart. And he's in theater and acting and doing backstage stuff, sound and lighting and everything.
Does he want to do film?
He's expressed interest in it. And so I'm,
You're like,
secretly hoping
here.
He'll stay.
Right.
But the climate has to be right to support those kind of jobs. And over the years, we've had to defend our program many times because of many of those misconceptions. The special session that happened, it was called because Governor Landry and his supporters really wanted to see some change when it came to the tax structure in Louisiana. And I'll be the first to admit it could use some work. And we are definitely supportive of positive change when it comes to those, possibilities. But when it comes to our jobs, and the film industry at large, there's so many people that it would affect. And unfortunately, all the incentives were included when they decided to look at restructuring the tax plan.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so, what was communicated to us was that it wasn't personal and that they wanted to completely restructure the way that Louisiana economic development gave, incentives to various businesses. They want to shift it to a grant-based approach that is a discretionary grant, right? So they would look project to project.
Wow.
And I just don't see the major studios, going through that.
Yeah.
They need to have some sort of security for their
definitely.
investments, which is why we have, the 5-year guarantee for television. If you start filming here in year 1 of a TV series, no matter what happens with the tax credits or anything else, you have 5 years guaranteed here.
Oh, wow.
So it gives that sense of security.
Yeah.
And not many productions know about that. And we've tried to communicate that to the studios, so many times. And they're, they understand that. Well, it is a big deal.
That's a great guarantee.
Yeah. There's a lot of small things about our program that we continuously try to educate people about. But in this special session, we really had to mobilize as a community. There were many other things that the legislators were looking at. Everything from personal income tax, corporate income tax, severance taxes that had to do with oil and gas, and service taxes that were very controversial. So there's a lot of stuff.
It was like a 200 to 300 page document that everyone had to look through.
Yeah. And
our tax credits were just included in this long laundry list of things.
Yeah. And it, to hear that it's not personal doesn't make it any less personal. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because this is these are our livelihoods. Yeah. This is our job.
I mean, we have kids here. We moved here.
Yes.
Because the credits were here. We moved here because we had a job here that was already we lived in a different state, and we moved here because there was work here. And then we got married and we had kids, and now our kids go to school here. So, I mean,
you built a life.
Yeah.
Around this opportunity.
Right. So if anything, it might not be personal, but it affects your entire life. You have to maybe change your life depending on what happens to it.
Yeah. And when people in our industry saw that, we've been through this before. We know how this goes. We know how to mobilize. If it's one thing that is a superpower that we have, it's organizing. In film, we're an industry of unions, and on top of that, film people get stuff done.
Oh, yeah.
You say, here, go clear this room, reset this, whatever it is, know, and we've had to do this multiple times before, but this was, everybody understood that this was an important task, and that, translated into, representatives and senators getting tons of calls and emails over the course of, leading up to the session and into the session. We just blew up their phones and emails to let them know, and not in a negative way, not in an antagonistic way. We didn't want to alienate anybody, because that's not the point of all this, right?
Right, and that could backfire too.
Yeah, these are the people that we're asking to fight for us, to be our champions, to understand the importance and economic impact of our industry. And there's the folks that are against us often cite numbers that are based solely on the return to the state when the tax credits are cashed in. So the 10% that goes back to the state, that's what they say. We only get a 10%, ROI. But they are not taking into account the $360 million in payroll to Louisiana residents. That's just the people that work on films. That's not even including the vendors.
Right.
So the vendors and the effect on the restaurants, the hotels, the small businesses, all across the state.
Yeah.
It's an incredible economic impact, and the union 478, we actually did an internal study leading up to this session of the year 2022. We're like, that was a good year to kind of like, look, we have all the data, we have all the call sheets. Let's look and see how many jobs we got. Let's look and see how many, actors there were, like all that. So we discovered that there were over 15,000 individual jobs.
Wow.
So that's including day players, that's including, core crew, show to show. Right. But 15,000 jobs is a lot. And that is just for crew. In addition to that, we counted about 2,500 actors working here in Louisiana for that year. And over 89,000 extras are registered in the extras database. We asked all the casting companies, like, can you tell us how many extras? And they were like, that's really hard to do. But here's our database. And it's got 89,000 people in it. And, I didn't know this before speaking to them, but many of the extras, background actors, do this as an alternative to unemployment. They do, many of them are seniors, and it, helps them, with a little bit of extra money, and it also gives them connection. Just from like one day, the lunch count from one day on, I forget what show it was, maybe Interview with the Vampire. It was like 552 people just at lunch for one day. And we counted over 800 regular core crew members on Interview. So that's just an example, for a television show, which television shows have been our bread and butter for a long time. And as the industry changes, it continues to be so important that we have these credits. So that needed to be communicated to the legislators. And we did a lot of education, and so did our members, Yeah. Our union members, especially 478 folks, really stepped up. I got CC'd on a lot of incredible emails showing people's work, telling their stories, talking about their families, talking about how many family members they also knew of that were working in the industry. It's whole communities. So I think those stories and the emails and calls had an impact on the legislators. And then there was also a day where we all showed up at the Capitol, and it was over 600 people that the staff at the Capitol counted coming through that day, and the majority of them were film. I was liaising with both Film Louisiana, which Local 478 is a big part of, and also the AFL-CIO. And the cool thing...
Can you say what the AFL-CIO is?
Yeah. It's the American Federation of Labor.
That's right, okay.
And so it's all these different unions that work together. That's an incredible asset to be a part of.
Yeah.
So that was a huge help, because the AFL-CIO has folks that lobby at the Capitol and have relationships with many of these senators. The president of the AFL-CIO in Louisiana, his name is Louis Wren, and he was an enormous help during this process. In helping getting meetings and conversations, getting conversations started with senators and House members. And then the other side of that is Local 478 is part of Film Louisiana, which is basically a trade association. It's the stages, the vendors, the unions, producers, even studios. But it's all the people who have major skin in the game, the leaders of the film industry. And we all have, we pay to be on the board, and that money goes towards, advocating for film and promoting film in Louisiana. So our two biggest goals this year were to promote film to producers in LA mostly, but all over really to get the word out, and then also to protect and promote the tax credit program, the film program.
Yeah.
And so our team is like so tight because we've had to do this so many times. So we know the drill. And it's an incredible experience to be able to work with these people. It's not the same experience that many other industries have, film folks in other states have. They haven't had to band together and like fight for something like we have. And, you know, in 2016, we lost our credits under Jindal, right? The folks that were in the early days of Film Louisiana, back when it used to be LFEA, Louisiana Film and Entertainment Association, they were speaking with disparate voices. They weren't speaking with the same voice. They weren't as organized, and that was causing big problems. And so we couldn't get what we needed to done in the halls of the Capitol. So that translated into our program not being able to be saved. So after that, you know, the leaders of the industry learned the lesson that we need to band together. And it's so incredibly important to do that. And after that, it's been this long push of building and growing. And it's been an incredible process to watch. And I've attended those meetings, once a month meetings, ever since I started working at the Union Hall in 2020. And it's been an incredible thing to watch it grow. And the power of speaking with one voice was never as apparent as it was to me during this special session, because we could speak to both sides of the aisle, right? The unions can speak to the Democratic caucus. The stages and the vendors could reach out to, you know, the Republican side of things and establish relationships there as business owners and talk about, hey, we're not, you know, opposed to these pro-business moves that the governor has outlined, but look at all these positive impacts of this business that's already here. Many of the things in the governor's tax plan were put in place to attract more business to the state of Louisiana. But those incentives that he's put in place take years to, you know, it takes years for Louisianians to see the returns on that, to get those jobs.
To get them really going.
Yeah, anywhere from 2 to 10 years in the experience of other states that have made changes that are similar to these changes that he had the goal to make. And, you know, so it was a delicate line to walk, but it was also really cool to see how powerful it was that we were able to speak to both sides of the aisle, and we were able to say, let's find a way forward together.
Yeah, because do you feel like being more of a Republican-led state at this point, we have a Republican governor, do you feel like sometimes legislators on that side of the aisle look at the film industry here as just a piece of Hollywood because Hollywood's mainly liberal? Do you feel like they sort of just go, you know, why would we support you?
Yeah, that, and especially with freshman legislators, that's a common misconception. They think that it's all these people coming in from LA and taking advantage of Louisiana, and it couldn't be farther from the truth. Those 15,000 jobs that I cited earlier, over 85% of those are local people.
Yeah.
It's closer to 90% actually, but 85% was our conservative estimate. But like, it's mostly locals that are working and taking advantage. And this is creating these jobs for local people. It's not any different than needing to be competitive in any other industry. Like the oil and gas industry, you need to be competitive in order to draw major employers here. And there's all sorts of tax breaks that the oil and gas industry gets. There's so many different industries, you know, that look from state to state to see where would the best place be to land. We are going to have a new data center from Meta and Facebook just outside of Monroe. And, you know, they are getting incentives from the state to come and land here. So it's the same thing that other industries are getting, but we are the only industry in Louisiana that is audited every 2 years. And
why is that?
As a way to look at the success of the program and
But why
give
is our program under more scrutiny than others?
It's a good question. But at the same time, we're fine with that because we know that the program is successful.
Right, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's like, look at us, look at our books. Like, this has a incredible positive impact.
Yeah.
Don't discount that is all we ask.
Right.
And, throughout the session, we were able to get many folks on our side, including so many state reps. Mandy Landry is just a unicorn of a state rep. She's just incredible. She's fought so hard for us for so many years, and she fought hard for us again.
Were many of the legislators in support of us to begin with?
There's always a risk because you never know what's going to happen in a legislative session, and I'll get to a good example of that in a minute. There's just some oh shit moments that you're like, whoa, I didn't expect that to happen. But we have so many in both the House and the Senate that are supporters of film, that are on our side, that have seen the impacts of film in Louisiana. And there's actually, for the first time, a state representative, Republican, Emily Chenevert, who used to be in film. She was a line producer and an APM and many other things, So she was able to speak from a place of experience. And she actually got up and gave a whole speech about film on the House floor. And she got like a bunch of people to go stand behind her, also state representatives. Wow. So it was this incredible moment, a show of support for film. But the governor asked that they vote to get the bills that included film out of the House and allow the changes to be made on the Senate side. So he was asking these House members to trust him that film would be taken out of the bill. And so they had to, in theory, vote against film by voting to pass this bill and not change it and send it to the Senate side of things. And that vote made some incredible and misleading headlines that scared a lot of people. Yeah, there was a Variety headline that one afternoon I was in a meeting and my phone just starts blowing up. And I knew that a Variety article was coming out, but I did not know that they were going to choose such an incendiary headline that would make so many people scared, that their careers were going to end. And, it's very misleading to kind of say, it implied that the film program was gone or that it was ending. And in the body of the article, it was like, well, this isn't done yet. It has to, go here and here and here.
But no one really looks at that.
Exactly. And during this whole process, we were, and before as well, we were getting meetings with, the chairs of the committees that were going to be carrying, our bills, and the, President of the Senate, Cameron Henry, was extremely supportive and very helpful to us. So we were having those conversations and conversations with individual representatives and senators all throughout. So we were having those conversations and making that progress without needing to make it high profile. There were still some twists and turns along the way. After it made it over to the Senate side, there was an amendment introduced that reduced our program, but not by a huge amount. So our existing program is $180 million, but only 150 of that is redeemable, right?
What does that mean?
When you redeem tax credits, basically the state sells them to you for 88 cents on the dollar. So you turn in your books, right? And for whatever expenses are eligible for the tax credits, you get this number. Let's say, $10 million that you're eligible to receive. Now, you're not going to receive $10 million. You're going to receive 88% of that because 2% goes towards education and the higher learning institutions in Louisiana, and 10% goes back to the state for administration costs and all the other stuff. So that's the 10% that they're saying, this is our ROI, right?
Yeah.
The 150 million is really the cap for the amount that gets redeemed. And so our entire cap was reduced to 125 million, both for redeemed and actual value. So now that number is the same. It's not 180 and 150. It's just 125 across the board. So that 125 is how much is going to go back to the producers when they turn in their credits. And it's also you can roll it over from year to year. Right now we have a $260 million surplus from times that we haven't used, $10 million here, $5 million there. It rolls up over time. It goes up over time. But there's also tax credits that haven't been cashed in that are still outstanding. So that's kind of balanced. In addition to that, the impact on our everyday lives, I don't think will be that different because the last 2 years have been rough, right? And this is like the last thing that we needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We came out of negotiations, then, all sorts of stuff happened this summer. We expected business to bounce back immediately, and it didn't. And then we, went into this legislative session. We've had a steady trickle of business, but we're still waiting for it to ramp up in a meaningful way. And the shifting sands of this industry, it's always been a roller coaster, and now the studios are really trying to figure out how to make a sustainable profit from streaming. And so they're trying to see what sticks, trying to see what models are working best for them. And what they've been doing now is making less content, unfortunately. So it's been a rough 2 years. That said, I don't think we're going to immediately go up to the volume where we're going to need that 125 right away. All of it.
Can I ask, when was the last time that we met the 150?
I think it was 2021 or 2020, I want to say.
That makes sense, because it was very busy then.
Those were our two busiest years. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but it was, those were our those were our high water marks as far as business in Louisiana. So it's not a lot of changing, and we're hoping to get some additional tweaks to the program in this next spring legislative session. We know that there are still some representatives out there and folks in the legislature that are iffy about film still. There aren't a ton of them, but we expect some bills to probably be introduced that we'll have to defend against, but it is not going to be to the level that we experienced during this session, I don't think, because we've already taken our licks. We've already experienced our reduction, and we have communicated loud and clear that our industry needs stability. And for us to come up in every single legislative session is the worst way to promote stability in any industry. It is to continue to attack it. So,
but do you think that in the spring it will be more like adjustments to fine print?
That's what we're hoping. We want to do some little internal tweaks to the language of our program that would not affect the overall cap, but would make it more attractive for films to come and set up here. The kind of oh shit moment that I referred to earlier was Senate Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Committee. The amendment was introduced to reduce film to 125, but to keep it. And we were happy, and everybody was like, all right. And we stayed to just hear the end, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
and
right?
Sure enough, someone on the committee introduced a bill that would affect the way that the credits are redeemed. And it would have made the companies that redeem the credits, they would have had to be Louisiana-based companies, and they wouldn't be able to get cash back. They would only be able to put credits towards existing tax debt, which would kill our program.
Do you mean like studios based out of here? What do you mean?
Yeah. But Exxon isn't based out of here, and they do a lot of business here.
Right.
Facebook is not based out of Louisiana,
Right.
and they're setting up a whole factory. So, like, there has to be some accountability here. You know what I mean? If we're going to put that standard on the film industry, it has to be put on everybody. You know, it can't just be you guys over here. You have to abide by one thing, but these guys over here, it doesn't, you know, like, and that point was made, and that person was like, I just wanted to make this point. I'm going to withdraw the amendment. And he did withdraw the amendment, and we were good to go. But it was a nail biter. We had 5 minutes of like, yeah, we did it. And then there's lots of whispering. We're like, what?
Yeah.
And so the chair of the committee didn't even know that amendment was going to be introduced that would threaten us. Yeah. So it was a surprise to everybody. But we were still confident, based on the conversations that we had, that we would come out of it, you know, with plenty of support for film and with our program intact, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
In the meantime, the press was just having a field day.
Like we would read things, and be like in a group chat and just like copy paste and go, "What the fuck does this mean?"
Yeah.
But then we would get emails from the local that said, "Be positive, it's going to be okay," essentially.
Yeah.
And we were like, which one is it? What do we believe? And it's not that we were like, I don't believe the union. It was that because you couldn't give us all of the information, I think we were like, just what's going on behind the scenes.
I think some of those headlines, like especially the Variety headline, a lot of their ad base, like a lot of the people that buy ads in Variety are based in LA.
Oh yeah.
And
right. I'm sure.
That kind of a headline, gosh, if we can't film in Louisiana, where are we going to go?
Yeah.
Look at this
right.
promise that Governor Newsom just made.
I know.
You know, like to raise the tax credits, to double the tax credits over there. And Film Louisiana has realized that it's important to also buy ads in Variety.
Right.
So that's going to be, we have been raising more and more money. And Jason Wagensback, the president of Film Louisiana, has been really a visionary about like the new direction that we're taking, which is much more marketing based and PR based, and not only with legislators but with the community in Louisiana and the producing world. You know, it's really about communicating and promoting, you know, communicating with these people and promoting our program. You know,
somebody who's considering moving here to work in film might just see a headline, or they might just hear a rumor and then go,
If anything, it's the opposite of security, right? It introduces a note of doubt, and we don't want to do that with producers. We don't want to do that with workers. We don't want to do that with vendors or anybody, right? In order to have a stable and secure industry, we need to promote a sense of security, and that's what we communicated to the legislators, and I think it was understood. So, you know, it was successful, and we're very happy, you know, that we were able to preserve the program, and the show of support was really cool too. 600 people showing up. Wow. That was, I mean, like we packed 2 rooms. Overflow rooms, plus the room that the Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Committee was happening. So it was 3 rooms and the hallways. And to show opposition to the bills, you have to fill out a red card. We were a part of HB1 and HB2. And so we encouraged everybody to fill out a red card for each. And we weren't going to speak. We weren't going to have a bunch of people speak that day. It was just a show of support, right? So the red cards kept on coming. And and Senator Foyle is the chair of the committee, and he kept on getting these like thick stacks, you know. And he was like, I saw his eyes, like it was like almost 3 inches thick at one point, one of the stacks, and his eyes just kept getting bigger and bigger, and like, it was great. I mean, it was a very, micro expression, but it was really like it felt like a victory to me because it was mostly union members. That was we didn't like share it with like the larger community because we didn't want to overwhelm people because there's so many people in film. But even just with union members, it was a huge showing. People care. People want their voices to be heard, and this industry matters to people of Louisiana. All over Louisiana. So it was exciting to see. So I think that kind of solidarity brings us together. It shows us that we have strength. It's not only showing the legislators, but it's showing each other.
When a studio is kind of scouting Louisiana as a potential location, what happens in those conversations?
So when studios are looking to film here, they are looking for a few things. The bottom line, like their budget, is the biggest consideration. The next thing is locations. And we have locations that can double as so many different places around the world. We have cities, we have small towns, we have, forests, we have swamps, we have beaches, we have a sand dune area just outside of Baton Rouge that could double for a desert, or a sandy location. It's really incredible the variety of locations that we have here. The creative community is also, I think, something that they look at because it's not only people with skills that they're looking for, but talent. And there's a certain energy here that is so inspiring. Throughout our industry, education has become increasingly important because we want to make sure that the next generation of crew members has everything that they need to succeed. And so high schools and colleges both have received $9.1 million in funding throughout the state from that 2% that comes out of the tax credits. And this is a direct result of films coming here, and that 2% of their of their tax incentive is going back into these higher learning institutions. It's incredible to see some of these programs. We are very involved in many of them. There's 2 high school programs, for example, middle school and high school programs. Cool Cooperative is one that's based here in New Orleans, and it's just so cool to see. I've taught a class before, and to see kids' faces light up when you talk about the different jobs that you can do on a film set, the different elements there are to any skill that they're interested in. They have tons of questions, and they're just really interested. They do this on weekends. They do this after school. It gets them involved. There's one in Shreveport, and it's actually statewide. It's called Film Prize Junior, and it's a competition statewide where kids in local high schools get together and make films, and they put them in a contest, and they're voted on and win prizes every year. And it's become bigger and bigger throughout the year. And then there's film programs at many of the universities. There is a film high school that is in the works in Baton Rouge, which is really exciting. It's going to be at Celtic. And that is specifically to train the next generation of filmmakers. That's really cool. It's really exciting. It's kind of like a NOCA, but for filmmakers. There's just so many opportunities also for adults to train. NOVAC, the New Orleans Video Access Center, if you want to get into film, that's a great way to get in. You can register for classes, and if you want to go into the art department, there's like a 2-week art department intensive class.
Why didn't that exist when I was getting in?
Right? That's what I say about all this, incredible education. And also IATSE Local 478 offers some really cool educational opportunities as well. If you've worked one day in a covered craft on a film set, you can train for free with the union.
Wow.
And you don't have to be a union member. You know, we teach classes in all the different crafts. It's amazing to just look at the list of educational opportunities that there are in film in the state. So, and it's all throughout the state. It's not just in New Orleans. There's you know, schools all throughout the state that offer film programs now. So it's really exciting that it's expanding and that our workforce is growing and that the skills are being taught.
To helping younger people who might
Exactly.
be interested in the film industry.
Yeah, or people who want a new career, a new start.
Right, yeah.
You know? Yeah, so I think that's something that we didn't really get to touch on, but that's really exciting is the educational opportunities in film. And, you know, it leads to a path into a job that, you know, the average film job makes $68,000 a year. And that's a good salary, you know. It's and especially with many of the jobs having union representation, employer paid health care, you know, if something goes wrong on the job safety wise, we take that very seriously. It's a good industry to be a part of, you know. So it's a good thing for our state.
What do you feel the most optimistic about in the coming year?
I feel optimistic about the calls that I've been receiving from producers, which have increased, and you know, there are a couple of big shows that are looking to land here. So I think that will create a good bit of jobs. I'm, you know, excited to see where we can go as a union and as an industry, you know, as we continue to build on what we've already created here. I think there's so much opportunity, and the more we communicate that to studios, to indie producers, to the outside world, the more our community will continue to thrive.
Thank you so much for providing all this information and just for coming here and talking.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.